All right, chapter 23 of your Bob Jones history text, and this one is on the Cold War. Now, Cold War is an interesting term and deserves a little explanation, and it is from a speech by a man you probably never heard of. Bernard Baruch was a financial advisor to a number of U.S. presidents, and he was giving a speech, and he made this comment. He said, "We are in the midst of a Cold War." Now, he made this comment in 1947, just a couple of years after the, uh, the end of World War II. And this is close to the time that Winston Churchill delivers a speech called the Iron Curtain speech, where he says, "An iron curtain has fallen across Europe." And Churchill's belief was that the free Western countries had been separated from the Eastern European countries now under Soviet rule. And so, what is meant by this phrase Cold War? And it's this: in a hot war, which of course nobody ever says a hot war, we just say war, we are directly engaged in combat against the country we're trying to overthrow. World War II, we're directly fighting against Imperial Japan, directly fighting against Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, with the goal of overthrowing those countries and bringing about their unconditional surrender. In a Cold War, you fight indirectly. And so we support one side, the Soviet Union supports another side. Now, why is this the case, and why is the Soviet Union doing this? In 1848, the Communist Manifesto is regrettably published, and Marx makes clear that his goal for communism is not a national rebellion, not just for Germans, but for all the world. And he believes that it is scientifically inevitable that there will be a worldwide communist rebellion, and uh, and we'll see the end of capitalism, and we'll see the ushering in of this scientifically inevitable workers' utopia where classes are abolished and everybody has ownership of everything, and then everybody's happy from there onward. And the first time that we have a successful communist revolution is 1917 in Russia. And so Lenin never lost that international vision of a communist worldwide revolution. He believed that Russia was just the beginning of communist revolutions that he hoped would take place around the globe, and that these communist governments, as they arose, are most properly and rightly led by the Bolshevik Party, by the Soviet government under the control of the Bolshevik Party. And the Bolshevik Party always functions best when it's under the direct leadership of Vladimir Lenin. And so Lenin always saw himself as the one man capable of successfully governing what he hoped to see as a series of worldwide rebellions that would sweep through all the continents of the world, bringing everything into a communist dictatorship, ultimately governed by the Soviet Union. With the transition of power from Lenin after his death to Stalin's takeover of the Soviet Union, the international aspect of that continues. So at the end of World War II, the Soviet Union is pushing Germans out of Russia and out of Eastern Europe. It's just that as the Nazis have been pushed out of Europe, Eastern Europe, the Soviet troops who pushed them out remain. And so countries like Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and some others are now under Soviet control and have communist governments imposed on them, all of them under the control of the Soviet Union. And even into Germany itself, there was a time when a good chunk of Germany was called East Germany and was a separate country from the rest, which was remained as which for the time was called West Germany. And so throughout this time, after World War II, we realized that our former ally, the Soviet Union, is now the most significant threat to world peace. And so America and the Western nations begin to try to find ways to combat the growth of communism around the world. So we start indirectly fighting against the Soviet Union. We support the government of South Korea. They support North Korea. We support the government of South Vietnam. They support North Vietnam. We support Israel. They support the Arab countries around Israel. We attempt to overthrow the communist government of Cuba. The Soviet Union generously funds and supplies the communist government of Cuba. And so throughout the world, on every continent, there are little flare-ups and big flare-ups somewhere in the background with involvement by either us or the Soviet Union. And on occasion with this in the background throughout the Cold War era. And that was at the end of World War II, we had developed the atomic bomb. 4 years later, the Soviet Union had developed theirs, and shortly afterward, China, communist China, had developed theirs. And then a great leap in destructive technology was made, going from the atomic bomb to the hydrogen bomb. And we also had missiles capable of traveling long distances and no means to stop them or to shoot them down, that could deliver a nuclear warhead powerful enough to eliminate most large cities. And so we had an escalation in explosive technology with atom bombs and then on to hydrogen bombs. In the midst of this is the space race, where we are using our competition in space to show the rest of the world who is the most technologically advanced country and whose side you really want to be on. Even the space race, which was a friendly competition in that we never had Soviet rockets firing on American rockets or vice versa, but still, even that was profoundly influenced by the events of the Cold War. And so there is a series of these conflicts of indirect, fighting between us and the Soviet Union that finally comes to a climax with the presidency of Ronald Reagan and the prime ministership of Margaret Thatcher. You have two leaders at the same time who are very historically informed, understand the nature of communism, and have a passion for liberty for the people trapped under communism. And it is their example, their leadership, along with, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, an extraordinarily brave Polish Union leader, Lech Wałęsa, who are the primary movers and shakers, with many others in the background, who bring about the collapse of communist governments throughout Eastern Europe. And in that critical year of 1989 and on into 1990, there is a genuine people's uprising throughout Eastern Europe. And finally, the Soviet Union collapses and the communist governments throughout Eastern Europe collapse, leaving just a few remnants behind. We still have Vietnam. We still have Cuba, and if you look around, there might be one or two others. Maybe North Korea, even though you could argue they're a little something different than communists. But the events of the Cold War come to an end at that time, at that period, and the results of the Cold War are things that we still live with today. So more about that later, and catch you later.